Let us continue our research into Herodotus' histories and the mysteries that lie within its pages. Beginning with the Egyptian beliefs. Herodotus goes on to state that the Egyptians were the first people to believe that the human soul was immortal, and upon their death, their soul would pass through every living creature and eventually return back into a human. A cycle which took 3,000 years. The Egyptians, it said, that before the time of King Ramses was a very well-governed place and prospered greatly. But Cheops, who was the next king, brought the people to utter misery. At first, he closed all the temples, so no one can sacrifice there. Next, he compelled all the Egyptians to work for him. Some of the people were tasked with dragging the stones from the Arabian mountains down to the Nile, then ferried across the river in boats, and organized others to receive and drag them to the mountains called Libyan. They worked in gangs of 100,000 men, each gang for 3 months. For 10 years, the people wore themselves out, building the road that the stones were dragged across. Now, this was work that Herodotus, in his opinion, believed was not much less than building the pyramids. The road was nearly a mile long and 20 yards wide, and elevated at its highest 16 yards. And it's all of stone, polished and carved with figures. Now, the aforesaid 10 years went to building this road leading up to the hill where the pyramid stands. Claims the pyramid itself was 20 years in the making. Each side was 800 feet long. He also claims that there is no block less than 30 feet in length. Now, this pyramid was formed in stairs or tiers. They would heave up the blocks up to the first tier of steps. They would use a lever to flip the blocks up to the next tier, and onto another lever onto the next tier. Now, before moving on, there is one thing that I would like to clarify for our listeners, and that is, what is an Egyptian priest? Now, automatically, most people hear the word priest and they're going to think Bible thumping, fire brimstone pastors, in America. That's what people are going to think of. You have to get that notion out of your head. That's not what Egyptian priests were. They weren't even super crazy about their gods per se. Technically, what an Egyptian priest would be compared to today would be an academic, an engineer, a scientist, people like that. That's what Egyptian priests were. They weren't just people who went around praising the gods all day long. That's not what they did. They did other things like engineering, building stuff, creating designs for new inventions, stuff like that. That's what Egyptian priests were. Now that we got that out of the way, I would like to continue on with some more mysteries of Herodotus. And that being, when speaking with one of the Egyptian high priests, Herodotus was told by this priest that since the beginning of Egypt, the very, very, very beginning of Egypt, twice in its lifetime, the sun rises where it now sets, and it sets where it now rises. So twice within the existence of all of Egypt, the whole planet shifted and the sun rose where it sets now. This happened twice during that time, which they believe was around 17,000 years. Now, contrary to popular belief, the ancient Egyptians did not believe that their pharaoh was divine. They did not believe their pharaoh was part God. I know that it's taught in academia and modern Egyptology that the pharaohs were divine, being bred from the gods. This is not true. This is a total farce. Even back then, the ancient Egyptians, the high priest, told Herodotus that there had not been a living God in human form for 17,000 years. So all their gods had always been animals at that point. So they never believed their pharaoh was in fact divine. They could trace the lineage of every king back to a certain point and declare that this person was not of divine nature, not descendant of a god.